Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design podcast, web series, whatever. I have yet another amazing friend here to talk about art making and music and all sorts of wonderful things. So if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Chris Fottrell. I like making cartoons. I like making music, and sometimes both of them at the same time, all in one.
Amazing.
Um, yeah, that's more or less what I do.
What got you, also you're an animator, you have like all of these very diverse talents. I'm sort of interested in like, did you get into music before art making or like what your journey has been in different creative fields?
Well, animation, I kind of got into when I was really young. I was kind of like 8 or 9, I guess.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and that at that point, it was just sort of like doing little flip book things with like sticky notepads, and that was kind of like the first, like most introductory, like first like thing I ever remember doing. So I've been interested in animation for a long time. Music, I guess I more took an interest in when I was more like 12, 13. Um, and that's when I started picking up guitar. And that's when I was listening to more things that made me interested in pursuing that. Um, so my like music, I guess my taste was kind of just like expanding, which I guess like at that age, that's kind of like when that happens. So yeah, I've been into animation for a long time, but I didn't really learn how to draw for a while. Like I wasn't really great at drawing, but I still would like to make just like little doodles and see them move. Um, so I was kind of between both, and I've been between both, I guess. I mean, I've gone to school for animation, and I feel well rounded in it at this point. Um, and music, I've kind of just pursued on my own,
Hmm.
uh, and kept up making my own projects. It's another thing that as a kid growing up, I kind of just did like in my bedroom, like recording stuff, but then not showing it to anybody and just keeping it, hoarding it all to myself. Um, but yeah, so to answer your question, a while now.
Yeah, that's crazy. Those are both super young ages to get into either being a musician or an animator. And sort of, I mean, this is very early in the interview to ask this question, but the question I'm most interested in is like animation and music are both very time sensitive. Like you have to have rhythm and like a sense of pacing that's very both mathematic and then like feeling oriented. And I'm wondering if like you think being an animator and a musician sort of like helps you have a sense of like pacing, or if like one influences the other a lot. Because like I love animation, I love animating, but I find like the pacing of animation to be incredibly difficult. And I'm wondering if I had more musical skills, if it would help that.
Um, I don't know if it's necessary. I mean, I think you can like appreciate music and appreciate like rhythm without necessarily needing to like pick up an instrument.
Hmm.
Uh, I think it's a very like felt thing, I guess. So, but I do see, yeah, that relationship very much like between music and animation, one informing the other kind of. I do feel like um, I try to kind of like at least music serves very much as like an inspiration in a way,
Hmm.
and um, not even like my own, but just like listening to a song that I feel connected to, or I just like can go into like the zone, as it were,
Hmm.
and just like draw and just kind of like listen to it constantly. Stuff like that kind of in a way produces the imagery in my head, I
Hmm.
guess. Um,
Very Oscar Fischinger kind of energy.
I'll take your word for it.
um, do you think like that produces more abstract imagery for you, or do you have like physical kind of cartoony images that come to mind when you listen to music?
I'd say more cartoony, probably just because that's like what I grew up with. Like I
Mm.
grew up just on a very steady diet of cartoons. And so I think in those terms, I guess. Um, but I do think about how visual art and music kind of relate to one another. Um, Animation is kind of like a sort of fascinating, um, has that fascinating quality to it to me, the kind of like rhythmic, the motion to it, bringing things like to life. Um, I remember there's this quote by Walter Pater that was all art, I think, constantly aspires to the condition of music.
Mm.
Um, I feel like I end up saying that to everybody at some point. I just everything, anytime I'm talking about what I make, and then I feel very pompous quoting it, but I do like it. I think about that a lot, about the idea of all art constantly aspiring to the condition of music, because music is like kind of the way that you experience it and the way that you feel it, um, or even interpret it. Very, it can be very different from visual art. And it doesn't need to necessarily be representational or anything like that. It can just evoke emotions on its own. Um, so I think about that a lot. I don't know if that has anything to do with what you've asked me, but
No, it totally does. Because I think
yeah.
like the main sort of not complaint, but like something I've talked to a lot of other artists about is like you see Beyonce or Taylor Swift selling out a stadium, like making so much money and so much like joy with their work. But like if you had a dozen paintings, you couldn't just like hold them up and then people would, have the same expressive reaction. And that's absolutely something where music just has a direct connection to emotions in probably a stronger way than any other medium. I I don't necessarily know if that's true, but I certainly feel that in my reaction to art, and I'm more of a visual artist than a musician, anyways.
It's I feel like music, maybe you can connect with it more, but it's harder to get that grasp in a way.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, I mean, like social media, it's like imagery is a huge thing. It's not very like listening to music isn't like, I mean, like there's apps for listening to music, but in terms of like getting people to like see your work, I feel
Mm.
like imagery is like has a huge benefit over music. I feel like it's harder to get people's attention to like listen to your music. Personally, I it can kind of like sell at a stadium, but then it's getting to that point, I guess, is a bit trickier. Um, which I like the benefits of both. I like um, that visual things like just like catching people's eye and like focusing on or thinking of ways to do that, I guess. Not necessarily letting it dictate whatever I'm doing, but just thinking in different terms, I guess. I like the kind of like benefits of both of them.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, what is nice is that you you can't really physically hold a painting in a huge arena, but you can put it online
Yeah,
and get a bunch of likes on
that's true. I hadn't even thought about that. Like,
it.
it's so interesting the way in which like just the last 20, 30 years of social media and the internet has really radically changed like what it means to be an artist and also like what kind of art people make. I feel like people often feel pushed in certain directions by the algorithm. So you no longer have, well, I mean, there's always been pressures, right? I guess in medieval times you had religious painting that was like, you were forced
Yeah.
to paint certain themes and not allowed to do other things. And there's always been censorship. But it is interesting sort of the area we live in now and like to be aware also of those pressures. I'm sort of interested in like if you could talk a little bit about your artistic journey and like what it was like to do animation school and how that sort of prepared you for the work that you're doing now, which is amazing. I love your work. I said that before the recording, but like your animation is so lively and colorful and active, more so than animation is already, which is a high bar. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Um, yeah, I'm very glad to have gone to to art school to study animation. I think it allowed me to expel a lot of garbage and just get it all out and be ashamed of it and go through all those motions in a nice, just sort of contained environment. But I mean, that is valuable. There is a value in doing that. Just like really getting that stuff out, and it will inform and like guide your path to whatever it is that you want to make, or even finding out what that is. And also definitely the sense of community that are offered. And I feel like when people ask me like about art school, about um, like if they should go, they shouldn't go, if they're questioning it, I feel like I find myself mentioning like the sense of community that it offered, which isn't like exclusive to going to school, but there it was very nice to be in that environment, to be amongst a bunch of people. It was nice and it was also terrifying. It was because you just look around at everyone's stuff and you're like, oh my God. Um that's what I was like. I was like, oh my God. So it is intimidating, but it's also, you know, you get to meet and talk to these people and um get sort of this insight a little bit and just hang out with them and just have fun.
Yeah.
So that's also great. So I think art school, I was very happy to have gone. I do feel like it had a definitely like an impact on my work. And I think it also made me aware of what things that I had to sort of determine on my own, how things would be perceived,
Hmm.
like what the recommendations are for certain things. And if I felt that like applied, not that I would like it's I don't know, that sounds like um maybe haughty or something. But it's like you kind of at the end of the day you just have to kind of like determine what it is you like looking at or what you like seeing or what you want to make. um and it's sort of like going through these thickets of like what things are, what the sort of like guidelines are of making things,
Hmm.
how they're supposed to look, you know, what's appealing, what's this, what's that. um and it's very clumsy and awkward because you're making things in art school that you're trying to very sort of like nicely stick to this path. um but then it just kind of ends up being very, for me it ended up being disjointed. um so it helped to kind of go through that and to go through these sort of motions and see um what gave me the sort of results I was looking for, I guess. And that's, I mean, I'm still, I guess maybe I'll always just be figuring that out. And
Yeah.
it's not really, I mean, I feel like, um, you know, coming out of school, I do feel like I started making my own things. And I did feel like I could make things that, you know, are at least like gradually getting to a point that it feels like this is the kind of style that I like. This is the kind of like um, look that I'm going for. And I feel like it takes a lot of, well, for me, it takes a lot of trial and error
Yeah.
to figure out what that is, and a lot of like research. And another nice thing with art school is like the sort of focus that it makes you have on your influences, on like what it is that informs what you make. Like things that I hadn't considered like were a huge influence on me. I had to kind of like actually examine and study and find out who made it, who who were the people creating these designs. So sorry,
No,
art
this is
school.
wonderful. I'm
This
I'm
is
wondering if you could talk about like what some of your inspirations were, what shows or movies or like comics that led to like you developing your style. Because I think you're right that a lot of people enjoy animation, and then they never think about how it's made or who made it or this like 100-year history of the field. So it's really cool that you did sort of a deep dive.
Yeah, I mean, I think I something that at least like sticks out very much is Lupin the Third, like
Hmm.
watching that on Adult Swim, stuff like that. Like basically, like if I had to like put it into a category, like old anime, like 50s to the 70s or something. That in particular had a very distinct style to me growing up that I didn't see anywhere else necessarily, and so it stood out all the more distinctly. So shows like Gigantor, like Astro Boy, Lupin the Third, even like Cowboy Bebop, although I mean that's like more recent, but still. Um, these shows with this really strong sense of style to them um, were something that when I kind of started like going through art school, I sort of realized like these are, whether I realized it or not, these are like the subconscious things that are informing what I like to draw.
Hmm.
Uh, it's almost like a signature. It's like a very sort of um, automatic kind of thing that I feel like um, you just end up leaning towards. So like I guess like Osamu Tezuka, definitely his character designs are amazing. Um, Yasuo Otsuka, who was a mentor to Miyazaki.
Hmm.
So like you kind of like see people's history too in these things. Um, like those people, I guess, like if I don't have like a ton of names offhand. Um, even like Mad Magazine, Harvey Kurtzman. These are more like illustrator
Yeah.
people who work in those fields, but like still like those are the people that I find myself like very um very drawn to their designs, the look. Um and I feel like those are the things that really inform my animation. Um so I guess yeah, I think in terms of like in terms of design or styles a lot maybe.
Hmm.
Uh I
Yeah.
think more in terms of like yeah, illustrators in a way to inform like the drawings that I make and how I want them to move, the sense of like motion. Um, yeah, at least like those are a few sort of influences that come to mind. Um, so like you mentioned, like the sort of like um color scheme, I guess that I like tend to go with um is probably mostly because I don't know anything about color. So I just go and pick, I'm like, this looks nice, it's bright. Oh, there we go. Um, but that was also informed a lot by like the color schemes of those old shows. Um, they had there's just something very distinct about the look of them.
Hmm.
Something that has that kind of like distinct look to it. Like growing up, I was like very drawn to something that stood out, I guess. Um, and yeah, I guess that's sort of been in a way, it's like just trying to make things that are like that are kind of like what myself as a kid would see on TV and be like, I need to see that. Uh,
Wow.
ideally.
Yeah. No, that's such a
Um,
wonderful way to think about having an art practice is like you're just not only just making something for yourself, but making something that like your younger self would enjoy. Like I think a lot about like the really old X-Men cartoons because they have that similar like saturated palette to a lot of anime. They have those like crazy 80s, 90s like buff characters. And I remember watching it for the first time in like high school or college and trying to figure out like why things don't look like that anymore and also like how to replicate some of these like nostalgic designs and palettes. And you're kind of right that like so much of an is like what brings about nostalgia is like the design of something more than a storyline or anything else. It's like these artistic choices people are making. I'm sort of curious like how you um come up, like you also do character design, you have like a sort of, I don't know, like you have this vibrantness to your work, and I'm wondering how you develop your characters and your motions, and like where you said where you got inspiration, but like maybe more about your process is what I'm curious about too.
For sure. That's a good question. I'm like trying to think like how do I make things? What do I make things? Um,
I'm stealing all your art secrets. That's what this is.
that's by all means. I just I hope any of them are helpful. But in terms of like a process or like how I come up with character designs, um, I mean, I feel like I have to kind of get in the headspace where I'm just drawing very automatically in a
Mm,
way. I'm not too, if I focus too much on like the character that I'm trying to design, I feel like 9 times out of 10, it ends up, I'm trying to keep it in this box and constrain it. And it ends up looking weird, or like I'm thinking too much about like how things need to be proportioned or things like that. Like I need to just be messy
mhm.
and kind of narrow it down from there until I see something that I'm just like, okay, yeah, there we go. We're getting there. It's just a very, it's very inefficient. It's just a lot of just messy scribbling and just kind of like letting my arm just kind of do the work, like just drawing freely and um, taking the sort of like shapes that I go to or the things that I find myself like uh, drawing in particular. If there's something like a character design that I really like, if there's something like some reference, like something like that, that I find myself looking at and just being like, that's something I want to draw, or that's something that like speaks to me in some way.
Mm,
That's a big part of the process. A big part of the process for me is just like looking over those like inspirations, um, just like looking at those character designs and trying to hone in on what it is in my brain that says this is good, um, as best I can. Um, and then going from, I guess going from there, I'm not sure. I mean, like music informs me. Music kind of, because it just makes you more excited to make something. Like it's kind of just like serves as like an impetus. Like you just like listen to a thing and then you're like, I can see something going with this. And then maybe you start designing a character that's like somehow inspired by it. I mean, that's like one way of doing it. Um, Usually, I mean, like I kind of just design characters for myself.
mm,
Um, and I mean, like there will be times that you have to design a character according to like specifications. And it's tricky. You have to find a way of doing it that you don't feel too stiff, too rigid. Just whatever I can do um to kind of minimize that, yeah, sort of like rigidity, if I can help it. I mean, there's like things about like technique and focus, and it's not like I'm trying to get rid of those. Um, so there's still like that aspect to it, but what's important to me is just feeling like just doing it. Because if I get too caught up in my head, I don't do anything.
yeah.
That's another thing. Finding things that keep you from just like banging your head against a wall, which is another, yeah, important part of art practice. That's my other secret. Just banging my head against the wall. So process wise, I guess it's a little, it just kind of like, I just like starting rough and then narrowing down. I guess that's the yeah, long story longer.
Yeah. No, I mean that's super interesting because everyone works pretty differently, and like I think it's kind of like a writing process. You have some writers who like will outline everything really detailed and then go in versus people who start free writing and then pare back from there. And it sort of sounds like you have the second approach towards animation, which I think is like a little more liberating. I'm also like not that type A, so the people who do the extreme outlines kind of terrify me, um, or intrigue me because I'm like, I can't imagine working in
Oh,
that way. Um, do you find yourself working like when you're animating something moving, like I'm thinking of the hand that you just did,
oh yeah.
like do you have like an innate sense of movement that you've developed after being an animator for so many years, or do you use reference? Like how do you make something so clean and like believable, I guess, is what I'm interested in.
It does have to do with having um an understanding of form,
Mm,
structure, stuff like that. So, which and that's another thing like art school is really good for. And is also not specific to art school. Like these are things you can kind of like do on your own. Like if you can go to like a life drawing class, do stuff like that, draw or just draw from reference. Like the more that you do that, the more you make that a regular thing, the more you get an understanding of like form and structure and the ability to kind of like translate a 3D object onto a 2D surface. Um, so I kind of credit that with like teaching me at least being able to draw more like dimensionally. I mean, I still mostly draw flat, but like if I'm doing something a bit more, I guess, realistic, maybe. Um, Anything that makes it, yeah, believable. And form can also apply to very cartoony characters, of course. Like
mm,
it's the same thing can apply to a character that, you know, that looks very exaggerated. You still have like that sense of form of what shapes they're made up of. Um, and kind of like starting from that sort of rudimentary point, like thinking of the shapes, thinking of like what this character is comprised of, I guess. Um, and then sort of like working over top of it. So with the hand, that was yeah, that was like reference combined with a bunch of like, well, it's not actually a page flip, it's digital, but the kind of equivalent of like going back and forth between frames.
mhm.
Um, so the usual sort of like starting with key poses, beginning and um, getting a pose in the middle, and then in between from there. And also kind of getting a sense for the movement as you kind of toggle between the frames.
Yeah.
So you could take two drawings and just kind of toggle back and forth between them and sort of get a sense for like how you want it to look. Like the rest of it, you just have to fill in your head. Sorry. Um, and that's a huge part of it. It's just like knowing what you want to happen, knowing what like arches you want the action to follow, um, knowing where to put your lines because there's just so many places you can draw something that are not the place that it looks the way that you want it to. So finding what that place is, pinpointing, which I'm like the hand animation. I mean, I was pretty happy with it. I had to like I did one version of it and I hated it, and I was like showing it to people and I was like, what am I what am I not like I'm feeling really iffy about this. I can't place it. And I tried like fixing it up, toying with it, thinking like I could just like kind of like make small adjustments and then in the end it would all like come together. Um, but I was working on just a bad foundation.
Yeah, totally.
That makes a huge difference too. So like the reference that I was working with before, um, I was working too quickly. Like I wanted to make this thing, and so the reference was pretty speedy. Like actually, like drawing the key poses was like really quick and sped up. And then I did like the opposite. I like rushed at the beginning, and then I like was so slow towards the end. But it worked much better when I took a bit more time at the beginning and actually like focused on like how my hand looks in space, like how it looks holding a deck of cards, like drawing studies of like what that looks like and how light informs like what it looks like, all that good stuff. Um, I took more time with that, and it resulted in something that I'm definitely happier with than the first thing I made, which now it's just like it's funny how that happens. Like there's something you can make and you can be like, oh, this is pretty good. And then you just do it over again and look back at the other thing and you're just like, oh my God, this was not good at all. So in regards to that, yeah, it was collecting ref collecting that reference, doing the sort of like studying to get the key poses in a position that felt right. It's a small animation, it's just like a hand rotating. So you could just look like one key pose is the hand like rotating here, and then the last pose is there. So even just looking between this pose and the last pose, flipping between them, just gives you an idea of like, oh, it just needs to
Yeah.
it's hard to even put into words for me, anyways. Like you just like can see like your brain fills in the gaps, and then you have to take what your the gaps that your brain filled in and make your hand fill them in. Um, and sometimes sometimes it's harder than other times. And there's still things about it that I like am kind of iffy on. But that's another thing that I'm kind of trying to come to terms with is just like settling on things and like realizing what kind of things I can live with, basically. That's very much something I'm trying to get a sense of right now. Like, what things do I feel like, no, we need to stop, we need to go back and fix this, and what things are like, okay, that's not perfect, but it doesn't harm the overall thing. Um, because I don't know, I could take forever
Yeah.
away, so I have to give myself like a strict line of just being like, that part is wrong, but we, we just need to make something.
Yeah.
I talk, I use we to address myself.
I
I think
do absolutely hate that the main takeaway of this story is that it's just hard work and practice is the key to success.
well, I don't know if I've reached, I wouldn't say success.
Well, you made a successful animation. Like the work is beautiful, and that in and of itself is success. Is you made a beautiful thing and other people admire it. Um, I think it's so striking listening to you talk how similar your process is to like the way animation rules were described like 60 years ago. Like so much of the, even though we have different tools and different technology and different influences, like so much of the art has kind of like retained its principles, like this kind of physical like flipping between frames and like understanding how things work in the real world and how to like cut it up into slices. um I'm sort of like interested in where you think you personally want to go with your animation, like in the future, like if you have any particular goal about the work you're making, because you have all these like beautiful historical inspirations, you have the work you're making now, like what keeps you motivated to keep making the work that you make?
um, oh, good question. I've I don't know. It's tough because I've always felt like a pretty aimless person. Um, so to answer that question, to answer the question, where do I want to go with my animation? I just want to keep, I guess, just making things that kind of, I guess, harken back to that feeling of like something that I guess like my younger self would see and have it be distinct. I mean, I would love to work maybe in TV, maybe in like features. I don't know, short films. Short films would be much more realistic.
Yeah.
Um, I'd like to work in either of those, like actually like flesh out because I work in very small, just like nice, fairly easily made like bits, like small loops, stuff like that. But I would like to make something a bit more fleshed out, and maybe also um, like I've always kind of wanted to make a comic. That's not animation,
Mm,
but
similar.
similar. Yeah, poses, whatnot. But
The world's most boring comic. It's like 17,000 frames. It's like just a film, but printed frame by frame, and that's the comic.
This exists. It's called
No,
that.
I'm kidding.
I was like, that sounds great. I'd love to watch that. I'd love to. It's just like one wide. Just read it from left to right. Um, yes, it's animation is essentially a really boring comic that's played really fast, so it looks cool. But yeah, comics are something I'm really interested in. Something I don't have a strong sense of story. I would love to make animation that tells a story, um, or I don't even know about like tells a story. It's just like something more fleshed out, more of like a complete work, like a short film or like a series or whatever. Um, while also kind of incorporating the music I'm interested in making.
Yeah. I was gonna say you've done some like music video or like bits of music video stuff for music, so it seems like that would be a very logical merging of your talents.
Yeah, music video does make the most sense. And maybe, yeah. I mean, like I find myself drifting more towards music, and for a minute it felt like I was drifting towards that more than animation.
Hmm.
And I think I'm always kind of like between the two. Like I'm always thinking of myself as like an animator and musician kind of a thing. Um, so I would definitely like to make as much as the music, I would like to make that still a big part of it. If that means just like making the score for something or actually animating a whole music video around something, that'd be great. If I could make a song that I felt like I saw like a vision for, um, amazing. Until then, but I am making music and I am trying to really um get more towards that goal of like releasing music, maybe making animation to tie into it. So that is a goal of mine, as well as just like doing things that maybe focus more on storytelling and trying to like sharpen that um, as much as I can. Um, just because it's not something that I'm not, I'm like, I wish I could like write
Yeah.
a story ever in my life.
Well,
Um,
you got the two talent. You got the music and the art. You can't have
yeah, you
everything.
can't, you
Like it's
got,
already impressive that you are talented at the levels that you are in each of those fields because a lot of people only get one, you know? But that's amazing. We're actually out of time. Crazy. I have so many more things I could have asked you.
I'm sorry. I,
No, don't be sorry. This is
uh,
perfect. I love talking to people who can just like give advice and be so like direct and clear about it. So it's been
just keep
amazing
going
having you.
on. Yeah, it's been great being here. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I really appreciate it. And thank you again.